A love long lost. The rain hammered against the window, mirroring the relentless drumming in Elias's chest. Across the room, Seraphina traced patterns on the condensation, her eyes fixed on some distant point. She wanted money. Not for survival, not for comfort, but for the sheer thrill of acquisition. He knew it. He saw it in the way she held herself, the subtle calculations in her gaze. Elias needed loyalty, a bedrock in the shifting sands of his life. He's given her everything, a gilded cage of privilege and opportunity, and yet the emptiness in her smile was a constant ache. He watched her, the contrast stark against the dim light, her beauty sharp and brittle versus his own weary resignation. He's always been drawn to the darkness in her, the rebellious spark that defied his attempts at control. But now it felt like a consuming fire. "I'm changing your name," he said, the words surprising even himself. Seraphina turned, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Oh, and why is that?" "It suits you better," he replied, a strange sense of liberation washing over him. "Something less predictable." She laughed, a low, melodic sound. "Elara, perhaps it has a certain edge." He nodded, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Elara. It felt right. A shedding of the old, a promise of something new, however fragile. He needed solitude, a space to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the enigma before him. The rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of a name, a past, a hope. The silence that followed Elias's suggestion was thick enough to taste. Elara didn't react with outrage or even surprise. It was that unsettling calm that always preceded a storm. She simply studied him, her eyes like chips of obsidian reflecting the flickering candlelight. "Why, Elias?" she finally asked, her voice low and even. "Why now?" He shifted uncomfortably, the weight of his own impulsiveness pressing down on him. It felt necessary, a fresh start perhaps for both of us. He knew it was a flimsy explanation, a desperate attempt to justify a decision he hadn't fully considered. Elara rose and walked to the window, her silhouette a dark outline against the rain-streaked glass. "A fresh start requires more than a new name, Elias. It requires a change of heart." He flinched at her words, the truth of them stinging like a physical blow. He hadn't expected her to dissect his motives so readily. He's always been the one to analyze, to control. Now he was the one being scrutinized. "And what change of heart would you suggest, Elara?" he asked, attempting a lightness he didn't feel. She turned back to him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Perhaps you should start by understanding why I want what I want." He hesitated. He's always assumed he understood her, that her desires were simply the predictable whims of a spoiled heiress. But now he wasn't so sure. "And what is it that you want, Elara?" "Freedom," she said, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. "The freedom to choose my own path, to define my own worth without being tethered to your expectations." Her words were a revelation, a glimpse into a world he hadn't bothered to see. He's always provided for her, shielded her from hardship, believing he was protecting her. But had he in fact been suffocating her? "I thought you enjoyed the privileges I provided," he said, his voice laced with a confusion he couldn't hide. "I appreciate them, Elias, but appreciation isn't the same as fulfillment. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy happiness. It certainly can't buy me a soul." Her words were a brutal indictment of his entire approach to their relationship. He's treated her like a possession, a prize to be displayed rather than a person with her own desires and ambitions. He walked towards her, drawn by an inexplicable force. He reached out to touch her cheek, but she flinched away. "Don't," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Not yet." He lowered his hand, feeling a profound sense of loss. He realized that he's lost her not because she wanted money, but because he's failed to see her. He's been so busy trying to control her, he's forgotten to understand her. The rain continued to fall, a relentless rhythm accompanying the unraveling of their carefully constructed world. He knew that the path ahead would be difficult, fraught with uncertainty. But he also knew that he had to try. He had to earn her back, not as a benefactor, but as an equal. "Tell me," he said, his voice raw with vulnerability. "Tell me what you want to do. Tell me what makes you happy." Elara looked at him, her eyes searching his. For the first time he saw a flicker of something other than defiance in their depths. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was still hope. Elara didn't answer immediately. She turned away, walking back to the window and staring out at the relentless rain. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the drumming of water against the glass. Elias waited, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He's never felt so exposed, so utterly dependent on her response. Finally she spoke, her voice low and hesitant. "There's a gallery in the old quarter, the Serpent's Eye. They showcase emerging artists, mostly sculptors and painters working with unconventional materials. I've been sketching designs for a series of kinetic sculptures, pieces that move, that interact with the environment." Elias was taken aback. Kinetic sculptures. It wasn't the kind of ambition he's associated with Elara. He's always envisioned her interests revolving around philanthropy, high society events, and perhaps a little fashion design. This felt different, authentic. Kinetic sculptures, he repeated, trying to mask his surprise. "That sounds fascinating." "It's more than just fascinating," she said, turning back to him, a spark of passion igniting in her eyes. "It's a way to express something that words can't, to create something that's alive, that breathes." He saw a glimpse of the woman he's never truly known, a woman driven by creativity and a desire to leave her mark on the world. It was a stark contrast to the image he's carefully constructed of her. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" he asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated, her expression clouding over. I didn't think you'd understand. I thought you'd dismiss it as frivolous, as a childish hobby." He felt a pang of guilt. He's been so focused on controlling her narrative, he's never bothered to ask what truly mattered to her. "I was wrong," he said, his voice sincere. "I'm sorry, please tell me more." She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached her eyes. "The gallery owner, Madame Dubois, is a formidable woman. She has a keen eye for talent. I've been sending her sketches for months, hoping she'd give me a chance. And has she? Has agreed to meet with me tomorrow to review my portfolio. It's a small step, but it's a chance," Elias finished for her. "And you deserve it." He paused, then added, "I'm happy to introduce you to Madame Dubois if you'd like. I have a few contacts in the art world." Elara's eyes widened slightly. "You would do that?" "Of course," he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. He wanted to support her, to champion her dreams, to be a part of her journey. Suddenly, a memory surfaced, a fleeting image from his childhood. His mother, a talented pianist, had dreamed of performing at the Royal Concert Hall, but his father, a pragmatic businessman, had discouraged her, insisting that a career in music was impractical. The memory stung, a reminder of the pain of unfulfilled dreams. He realized that he's been repeating his father's mistakes, stifling Elara's potential with his own misguided sense of responsibility. "I want to see your sculptures, Elara," he said, his voice filled with a newfound determination. "I want to understand your vision." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and hope. "I'd like that very much." The rain had finally ceased, leaving behind a city washed clean and shimmering under a pale morning light. Elias, impeccably dressed as always, waited in the lobby of the gallery, the Serpent's Eye. The name itself felt intriguing, hinting at a hidden world of artistry and intrigue. He's never been particularly drawn to the art scene, preferring the predictable logic of business, but he was determined to support Elara's ambition. The gallery itself was tucked away in a narrow, cobbled street in the old quarter, a stark contrast to the opulent mansions and grand avenues he was accustomed to. The building was ancient, with a weathered stone facade and a single, ornate window displaying a swirling, abstract sculpture. He spotted Elara approaching, her usual elegant attire softened by a touch of artistic flair, a flowing scarf draped over her shoulders and a sketchbook clutched in her hand. She seemed nervous but also excited, a vibrant energy radiating from her. "You seem different," he observed, a genuine smile playing on his lips. Nervous mostly, she admitted, her cheeks flushed, but also hopeful. The gallery's door opened and a woman emerged, her presence immediately commanding attention. Madame Dubois was a striking figure, tall and slender, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and piercing gray eyes that seemed to assess everything at a single glance. "Mr. Thorne," she greeted Elias, her voice crisp and formal. "I understand you're a patron of the arts." "I'm learning," Elias replied, extending his hand. "And I'm delighted to meet you, Madame Dubois. This is my associate, Miss Elara Sterling." Elara offered her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. Madame Dubois' gaze lingered on her for a moment, as if evaluating her potential. "Miss Sterling," she said, her voice softening slightly, "I'm intrigued to see what you've been working on." They were led into a spacious studio filled with sculptures of varying sizes and materials: bronze, marble, glass, and even reclaimed metal. The air was thick with the scent of clay and paint. Elara carefully laid out her portfolio, a collection of sketches and preliminary designs for her kinetic sculptures. They depicted intricate mechanisms, delicate balances, and graceful movements, all inspired by the natural world. Madame Dubois examined each piece with meticulous attention, occasionally pausing to ask questions about Evara's inspiration and technical approach. Elias watched, fascinated by the intensity of her scrutiny. "Your designs are ambitious," Madame Dubois finally said, her voice betraying a hint of surprise. "The engineering involved would be quite challenging." "I'm aware," Elara replied, her voice steady. "I'm working with a local engineer to refine the mechanics. And what is your vision for these sculptures?" Madame Dubois pressed. "What do you hope to achieve?" Elara took a deep breath and met Madame Dubois' gaze. "I want to create something that moves people, that inspires them to see the world in a new way. I want to capture the beauty of movement, the elegance of balance, the power of nature." A long silence followed, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner of the studio. Then Madame Dubois smiled, a rare and genuine smile that transformed her face. "Miss Sterling," she said, her voice filled with a newfound warmth, "you have a spark, a vision. I'm prepared to offer you a solo exhibition here at the Serpent's Eye." The news of Evara's solo exhibition at the Serpent's Eye spread like wildfire through the city's social circles. Invitations were sent, articles were written, and whispers of the talented Miss Sterling filled the air. Elias, basking in the reflected glow of her success, found himself fielding congratulations and inquiries from acquaintances he barely remembered. But beneath the surface of the celebratory atmosphere, a subtle tension began to build. The pressure to deliver a groundbreaking exhibition was immense. Elara, once driven by a pure passion for creation, found herself increasingly burdened by the weight of expectation. "It's wonderful, of course," she confided to Elias one evening as they strolled through the manicured gardens of her family estate. "But I feel trapped. I'm not creating for myself anymore. I'm creating for the critics, for the patrons, for the expectations." Elias, accustomed to the cutthroat world of business, understood the feeling all too well. "You need to remember why you started," he said gently. "Reconnect with that initial spark, the joy of creation." But words of encouragement proved difficult to translate into action. Elara found herself obsessing over every detail, agonizing over every design choice. The engineer she was collaborating with, a gruff but brilliant man named Mr. Finch, noticed her distress. "You're overthinking it, Miss Sterling," he said bluntly one afternoon as they reviewed a particularly complex design. "Art isn't about perfection, it's about expression. Let go of the control." His words resonated with her, but the fear of failure lingered. She started having visions of empty galleries, scathing reviews, and the disappointment in her family's eyes. Meanwhile, a new complication arose. Lady Beatrice Ashworth, a notoriously influential art critic known for her acerbic wit and ruthless honesty, expressed a particular interest in Evara's exhibition. Her opinion could make or break an artist's career. "She's requested a private viewing before the official opening," Elias informed Evara, his voice laced with a hint of apprehension. This could be a significant opportunity, but also a considerable risk. Elara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. The prospect of facing Lady Ashworth's scrutiny felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of potential disaster. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias took her hand, his gaze unwavering. "You are stronger than you think," he said. "Trust your instincts, create from your heart, and remember, the most important thing is to be true to yourself." The day of Lady Ashworth's private viewing arrived, cloaked in a nervous anticipation that hung heavy in the air. Evara felt as though she were wading through treacle, each movement slow and deliberate, as she oversaw the final preparations for the exhibition. The sculptures, gleaming under the gallery lights, seemed to mock her with their silent perfection. Mr. Finch, observing her distress, offered a rare, encouraging smile. "Don't let her intimidate you, Miss Sterling. She's just a woman with a pen." But the words offered little comfort. Evara knew Lady Ashworth's pen could wield more power than any sword. Lady Ashworth arrived punctually, accompanied by a retinue of silent assistants. Her gaze, sharp and assessing, swept over the sculptures, lingering on each piece with an almost predatory intensity. She moved with a deliberate slowness, her silence amplifying the tension in the room. Elara stood rigidly beside Elias, feeling the weight of his presence a strange mix of support and pressure. She tried to focus on the art, to find solace in the beauty of her creations, but Lady Ashworth's presence was a suffocating force. Finally, Lady Ashworth stopped before the weaver, Evara's most ambitious and technically challenging sculpture, a complex kinetic piece designed to mimic the intricate movements of a spider spinning its web. It was a piece born from a moment of profound inspiration, a reflection of her own desire to create something beautiful and enduring. Lady Ashworth studied the sculpture in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then she turned to Elara, her expression unreadable. "It's ambitious," she said, her voice dry and devoid of warmth. "But is it art, or merely a display of engineering prowess?" Elara felt her carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. The question, delivered with such calculated precision, felt like a direct assault on her soul. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Then, unexpectedly, a small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the gallery. The lights flickered, and a low hum filled the air. The weaver began to move, its intricate mechanisms whirring to life. It spun and danced, its delicate threads shimmering in the light, creating a mesmerizing display of beauty and grace. The movement wasn't part of the programmed sequence. It was spontaneous, unexpected, and utterly captivating. Lady Ashworth's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something akin to surprise crossing her face. She remained silent, observing the sculpture with a newfound intensity. Chapter 7. Threads of Truth. The spontaneous movement of the weaver had silenced the gallery. Even Lady Ashworth seemed momentarily stunned. Then slowly, a faint smile touched her lips. "Remarkable," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "Truly remarkable." The smile wasn't a declaration of praise, but it was something far more valuable, a sign of genuine interest, a hint of understanding. Lady Ashworth turned to Elara, her gaze less critical, more contemplative. "You claim to be inspired by the spider's web," she said, her voice softer than before. "But I see something more. I see a reflection of your own struggle, the delicate balance between control and surrender, between ambition and authenticity." Elara felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't the effusive praise she might have craved, but it was a validation of her artistic vision, a recognition of the truth she had poured into her work. The exhibition opening was a success, Elias announced, breaking the silence. "The reviews are overwhelmingly positive. Lady Ashworth's piece, in particular, has generated considerable buzz." But Elara wasn't focused on the accolades. She was looking at the weaver, movements now slowing, returning to stillness. She realized that the unexpected movement hadn't been a malfunction, but a manifestation of the emotion she had been suppressing. "I understand now," she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. "Art isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. It's about sharing your truth even when it's messy and imperfect." Lady Ashworth nodded, her expression almost kind. "You have a rare gift, Miss Sterling," she said. "Don't let the expectations of others define it. Create from your heart and the world will follow." The exhibition opening was a whirlwind of activity. Elara found herself surrounded by admirers, critics, and potential patrons, but she felt strangely detached, as if observing the scene from a distance. She caught Elias's eye, and he offered a reassuring smile. Later that evening, as the crowds thinned and the gallery lights dimmed, Elara found herself alone with Mr. Finch. "You were magnificent tonight, Miss Sterling," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "You faced your fears and shared your truth. That's what makes a true artist." "Thank you, Mr. Finch," she said, smiling. "I couldn't have done it without you." As she looked around the gallery, she saw the weaver standing silent and still, a testament to her journey. She knew that her life would never be the same. She had faced her demons, embraced her vulnerabilities, and discovered the power of her own voice. The threads of truth she had woven into her art had not only captivated the world but had also set her free. And as she stepped out into the night, she knew that her artistic journey had only just begun.